Well, I just wanted to thank you for doing this. And I read your book, Running Out of Water, and it's packed full with information. It's amazing. Um,
Great, thank you.
you're welcome. So it's even hard to figure out
Good.
where to begin. So let's start with the basics of water. I never really thought about it until you mentioned that water is finite. I mean, I never consciously thought that it's finite. You see the rain, you think it's adding more water. And so could you go into that, how the water is finite?
Well, it's that basic stuff that we learned in grammar school, elementary school, and we seem to have forgot it. And that's that water, the water we have on the planet is the water we have. That's it. And it's been the same amount of water since the beginning of time on our globe. And so even though the Earth is covered 70% by water, has to go through that same cycle that it's always gone through, and then less than 1% of that water that covers the globe is actually accessible to us. So you have this finite amount of water. It's the same amount, as I said, since the beginning of time. And now you have 6.7 billion people sharing it. That's just a fact. That's just what it is. And within 15 years, going along with any of the projections that are out there, we'll have 8 billion people sharing that water. And then you have climate change, which in many areas of the country is already impacting it, meaning that there's less snow and more rain. And you think, well, why does that make any difference? It's still water. Well, the snow acts as natural storage. In fact, for places like California, where I hail from, 60%, and as you know, is a large agricultural source for the rest of the country and other parts of the world. 60% of our water is stored in the snow, and as it melts, it trickles down, and it provides water year round. So when you have less snow and more precipitation, the water goes away quicker, and it doesn't provide that year-round source of water. So climate change is also impacting it. So you got, there's more people using it. Climate change has impacted it, and also the way we use it. We make it so that sometimes we can't reuse it, or it pollutes our sources of water. Well, think of it this way. Stop me if you
No,
want
this
me
is
to.
great.
I'll
Yeah.
stop, Lori, because I'm sort of on a roll right now. But for every drop you use, you've got to dispose of it. All right. So, and how you dispose of it has a direct or indirect impact on your future water supplies. And what I mean by that is that, with the exception of San Francisco, Boston, and New York, with the exception of those cities and maybe a couple other smaller towns, your source of water is water that's been used by somebody else before you. For example, if you're in St. Louis, people use the river, that water upriver from you. So how we dispose of it may have an impact on our future water supply. So the question is, how you dispose of it, does it make it harder to have future water supplies? And secondly, are we disposing of it in a way that maybe not only that it doesn't hurt us in the future, but also maybe that we could use it again? In other words, that's where recycled water comes in. So anyway, to answer your question, we're on this collision course between a very finite supply, remember, that same amount of water, and now 6.7 billion people, which we're on tap, no pun intended, to have about 8 billion in less than 15 years. So that's what it is.
So this sounds pretty serious, actually.
Yeah, and the difference between the water, because everybody says, oh, water is the new oil. It's not, because there's substitutes for energy and oil. There's no substitute for water.
So what do we do about it? We're at this crossroads. I know you've mentioned some things in your book. Maybe you could go through some of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, our book was not meant to be a doom and gloom. When we wrote the book, we said, okay, we've got to make it accessible to just folks that are interested in current events or the world, or just just everyday folk. But we gave people solutions because we do believe, not we said, oh, this can be done. What we did is we wrote about case studies where people in the U.S. or in different parts of the world are actually doing things, using water in a way to avert the crisis. And what we put down there is solutions that can and should be replicated.
Yeah, I was intrigued by the solution of new water, the recycling of wastewater.
Right.
And people, when you say that, people aren't too thrilled about that, and the psychological aspect of that and overcoming that. So how is that? I know there was a case study where that psychological aspect was overcome.
What happened in Orange County and in Singapore, two very different places, but both for different reasons, having water stress, look to the issue of using wastewater and recycling it. And when you first say that to people, they go, oh my God, toilet to tap, are you crazy? But then they get it. Then when you actually are upfront, now they both took different approaches. Orange County right up front said, we are treating sewer water. Plain and simple, we're going to treat sewer water and we're going to take it to distilled water quality and we're going to have it approved by all the health officials in the county and the state. And we are going to be providing you distilled water, still water quality water. Period. We're going to provide that to you. And they were able to do it. And they were able to explain to people and people got it. And they said, wow, okay, we understand. And then in Singapore, they didn't say it was sewer water. They called it used water. That's how they sold it. They did explain it like Orange County. My understanding is they went through all the details of how the system worked, but they didn't refer to sewer water, used water. Orange County decided to go straight out there with people and say, we're taking sewer water and we're treating it.
Yeah. How do you think? I mean, it sounds like this process is sort of only in a limited use right now. Why do you think that it's not becoming more common?
We're in denial. So we're not willing to take a jump. For example, in the cases that we wrote about agriculture, and that's 70% of our water use around the globe is agriculture. There's a lot of things we can do to easily improve the agricultural water use by 10%. Easy. But people just go on with business as usual. I mean, in California, they were drawing groundwater even though the ground had subsided by 70 feet. Because they kept pulling water out and it wasn't being replenished by the rain, by natural, methods of the rains. The streams weren't replenishing the groundwater and the ground kept sinking. And they didn't think there was a problem. Talk about denial. I mean, ground sinks 70 feet around you and now they're all upset because, they've had to cut off some of the water at the Delta because of environmental impact. And now they're flipped out like that should be a surprise. I mean, I don't want to sound too unsympathetic because all of us are in denial. I just want to be unsympathetic to those group of farmers, but all of us are in denial. What we found is that, particularly with agriculture, unless there's an economic or regulatory incentive, people don't get off their duffs. They just go on their same old, same old. Even though in the cases we showed in agriculture with people changing, using available technology, this is not a technology issue. Technology is available. Unless there was some incentive, people didn't get off their duffs and it was business as usual, and yet we are in a real slippery slope.
How do we make people understand? I mean, I know it's education, but that's a long process in each area to educate all these different people.
I know this sounds very 60s, but we need an overall consciousness raising around this issue. Part of it is, I think some of us who look at our environment and are very concerned about the future, we're going to pay attention to it. I think for people who are running large water utilities, they have to do a better job of educating their population. And I think business leaders, I would say politicians and someone who's been in former elected office, I would say that should be the major thing that should be pushing. But unfortunately, the politics in our country is so crazy right now. And a lot of politicians are afraid to raise a new idea, especially if it may involve people doing something different or maybe some initial upfront cost that, politicians are so afraid of that now. They're such scared little bunnies right now. They're afraid that some angry, crazy group is going to come at them, and they're nervous. And political will starts with us. So even if our political leaders are nervous, we should be asking them, hey, what is it about what's with our water system? Are we treating our wastewater so that it doesn't pollute our local lakes, rivers, and bays? This is one thing. If anything, I want to leave people with this. The crisis in the Gulf was pretty horrible. Really horrible. I mean, there's no questions. But at the same time that crisis was happening, and a staple of that crisis in the news meeting was all those signs up that said beach closed around the Gulf. Remember those? Okay.
Yeah.
At the same time those signs were up in the Gulf, there were signs up in the Great Lakes, in Rhode Island, in New Jersey, all along the shores and in lakes. There were also beach closed signs, same time. Because wastewater treatment plants now, our water is now poisoning us because our wastewater treatment plants are old. Clean Water Act, which required them, was 40 years ago, Nixon administration. And those improvements that made 40 years ago are now aging out. The population has grown larger, so the combination of aging infrastructure and infrastructure that's overwhelmed by a larger population. And so now we're poisoning ourselves. So at the same time, we were all upset, and rightfully so, about the tragedy of BP spill in the Gulf and those beach closed signs. There's beach closed signs all over this country. And we didn't have the same sense of urgency. We do have a water crisis. There is a way to avert this crisis. There are solutions that have been done, and we need to replicate them.
This has been great. Your book has been eye-opening, and this conversation has been. So I really appreciate you doing this, and I'll link to your website with this recording, and make sure the word gets out.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori, and I look forward to seeing it.